Hello, I'm Brenda Harris, and this is On the Creative Road, and today is day 10 of 30 days of art warm-ups. So yesterday we started with some watercolor, and so if you joined us, we're going to use the same setup. So we're going to still be using water. You'll need brushes, you'll need whatever watercolor set you're using, or perhaps you're using gouache, maybe you're using acrylic, and that's okay. You just need to thin out your paint a little bit more to possibly get that same, if you're looking for the same transparent look as I'm getting with my watercolor. And yeah, we're just gonna play around a little bit more today, and I'll explain more when we get started. All right, I really don't want to get too technical about my supplies because I don't want you to feel like you have to have a certain supply to be able to do a warm-up. You can use whatever you need to use. You can legit just use your kid watercolor set and still be able to experiment and have fun and make fun things like this. We made these the other day and I just used random things that I found. The purpose isn't to get caught up on what supplies you're using. It's just to have fun. So today I want to use a thicker brush. Yesterday I used a brush that allowed me to have the smaller brush strokes, almost like a pencil or pen. So you can tell this one I didn't use as much water, so the paper stayed fairly flat. And on this one, since it's a thinner paper, it had more water and it curled up the paper. So I'm wetting these two spots up, and let's see what happens when we add color. I'm just gonna let it bleed. So this is wet on wet because I wet the paper first and then I added my wet brush to my wet little circle there. And so you're gonna get those soft edges and that bleeding color there. Let's try this one out. So this is watercolor paper. Like I said, this is just thin drawing paper. You can already see the difference. You can see how well the watercolor paper is handling that water more than this one. This one's already kind of bubbled and this one's so lovely. But it takes this line mark really well only because the brush is fairly dry. It doesn't have a lot of water in it. So if you do have the thinner paper, I recommend not using as much water. I'm gonna try doing a square. So now I just have my brush is wet and I did not wet the paper, but I did have a lot of water in my brush only because this is a thicker brush. It is a bigger brush than that thinner one, and so it's just naturally gonna hold more water. So I want to do another square, but that one, while that one had a lot of water, this one's not going to. So it's a dry, very dry brush. And you get that dry effect. Why did I do such a light color? Let's try a darker color. Dry off my brush so that way it's not so wet. It's like you just want a little bit because I do want to activate the color. The well is just dry, but I want it to be a little wet so I can grab some of that pigment. Let's see if I might draw it off on my paper towel here. You'll be able to see this a lot better than that pink. And get that really cool dry brush effect. And that's barely any water in that. And let's do it on this piece of paper too. This is that thinner paper. And the only thing we haven't really experimented with is some line work on this watercolor paper. All right, I'm just gonna finish out this page for the rest of my warm-up, and we're just trying out different textures. We're just trying out what happens when we wet the paper first and then we come on top of it with a really wet brush. And so we got some of those blooms and little streaks there from that attempt, from that experiment. This was on this thinner drawing paper. See how better it is to have this thicker watercolor paper. And I do think this is not very expensive water paper. This is that thicker craft paper that I had. But look how well it took the paint than this thinner paper. The lines were fine. The drier marks are fine with a little bit of water, but it's mainly good for drawing with pencil. And so let's see, what other texture can we do? I'm gonna use this medium-sized brush and maybe get some smaller, brighter marks here. Let's see, I'm gonna wet this red. And let's see if we can practice like a value scale with these dots. So we have that one. Yes, and I have my paper towel here in case I need it. I'm gonna water down my color here a little bit. We kind of did this yesterday. The more water you have and less pigment you have, you're gonna get that more transparent brush stroke. So, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna let it dry and then come on top of it with a few more layers to experiment. So let's let this really thin layer dry. And then let's try another wet with some dry. Add-ons. So I'm gonna wet this paper. This is a shadow green. Put that here. And now I'm gonna tilt my paper on purpose so it'll go down the line there. Maybe I'll do it on this side too. Let's see how nice. And then, do a similar thing there, but I didn't tilt my paper. And then I'm gonna grab this red. Let's mix some colors in here, but I'm only gonna I'm not gonna mix them with my brush. I'm gonna mix them. I'm gonna let the water do the mixing. Okay, let's mix them into them. I'm gonna put this purple here and just see how that dries, how that plays together. Let me get this blue and add that here. I love that lighter blue color that I had used yesterday. So I'm gonna pop that in there. And I'm gonna grab this green for here. Let's see how that color for this light blue, maybe go back to a purple here. There's some really bright crimson. Nice. Cool. Let's see how that dries up. So this is already dry. And once it's dry, let's attempt to add some color on top of it. So now I'm just going to add some playful texture to the already dry. And it's nice because since it's already dry, it's not going to bleed. So I can add that detail right on top. If I had more water on my brush, then it could potentially kind of activate what's underneath it. And I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to make my brush really wet. And let's see, what color should I grab? Tan. It says Mars Yellow. Really nice earthy tan. And there's a lot of water on my brush. Okay. Let's see, I'm gonna just clean off my color a little bit. So that way I can get a lighter color. I'm just picking up the pigment actually from the color that I just put down. So that way, because if I go back to my over here it'll be darker, and also you can see where I am picking up the water as well from that section. So it's going to soak it up and leave that little outline line. The brush is picking up the water to create that. So when you add water to paint that has already been put down, you can potentially extract it and create this kind of almost like I'm like erasing. So that's something to play around with, because, and this is still drying, you can see, but we're getting some really cool where it's mixed in together. I didn't mix it with the brush, I literally just put the color down, but since it was so wet underneath, the colors are naturally going to bleed into each other, and it's going to do that blooming where you get those little arms reaching out and they blended together without me even using my brush. And then let's do, so now that this is dry, we can come on top of it here and use some pastel on top of it and try to blend it a little bit. I'm abstracting this. There's nothing that I'm trying to like portray right now. I'm just doing different textures and scribbles just to kind of play with our materials here. And if I grab one of these colors from yesterday, I have this really bright pink that keeps grabbing my eye. And I'm thinking, what if I do some colored, now that it's dry, what if I do some colored pencils on top? No rhyme or reason, just fun stuff. Cool. I'm gonna leave it. I kind of like the way it looks like that. It's kind of fun. So that's a fun, playful warm-up. It really had no specific direction. And I think that's half the fun, is that it was just playing with the material, seeing what happens if we have less paint, if we have less water, if we have a wet paper, if we have a thinner paper, if we have a thicker paper, if we have some texture and grit to the paper, what happens when we add colors together. This is play, this is fun, I'm making some mental notes that I don't even know about. It's just happening in there. Like for example, that I normally wouldn't do that. I normally wouldn't like pick up the paint, but I wanted to show you what would happen if you added too much water. If there's too much water on your brush and then you start painting on top, you gotta be careful with that, because then it starts to pick up that color that's underneath. But you might want that technique. That would be great toad skin, or great texture for like some sort of like toad nature type thing. I don't know. So something to play with. Come back tomorrow and we're gonna actually paint. I'm gonna have a couple references and we're gonna paint from our reference. I feel like I'm looking at this and this just looks like some sort of little, maybe it's a strawberry. Could be a strawberry. You're like, what are you doing? It looked fine how it was. Why are you messing with it? It looked like little strawberries to me. So I wasn't done, okay? I wasn't done. So tomorrow we'll do something similar to this. I'll have some references and we'll be making, instead of it being abstract, we'll be making something with it. All right, see you tomorrow.